All right, so we are back in the workshop. I haven't had much time to get in the workshop. Well, no, that's not right. I have had time to get in the workshop, but I haven't been in the workshop because it has been very cold here in the UK. I'm sure people watching this probably, like if anyone's from Canada, it gets way colder over there, but it's pretty cold for us. It's -3, -4, and you know, my workshop is outside, so it does get pretty damn cold. I have got a heater, but of course it takes a long time to get it up to some sort of temperature. If it's 0, which it has been, I've got a temperature gauge in here. It's actually built into the heater, so I can see how cold it is in my workshop. And when it's at 0, even if I have my heater on for like 2 hours, it only gets it up to sort of 10 degrees. So it's yeah, it's a bit of a struggle when you've had a full day at work. It's January, it's dark, and then it's not very motivating to come into a freezing cold workshop and start you know, tinkering with planes. So I haven't been doing too much, but I've decided tonight, it's still absolutely freezing now. It's about -2 outside, but it's a Saturday, so I did switch the heater on earlier and got the place warmed up a bit. So I thought I'd come in, do a little bit of work. It's so cold, I've had to shove all my glues and things into a container and take these inside because I'm concerned that they might, you know, some of them might freeze up. Sure, it won't do them much good anyway. But we've got a lot to do in this episode. So this episode is going to be basically getting this model finished off. So first, well, one of the first things I've got to do is paint the canopy. So that's fairly straightforward. I'm going to mask off the outside and then just paint the inside. One thing I have decided to change though, I can't remember what I said before, but the fuselage is going to be black, and I was going to do the canopy black, but I thought it's just a whole lot of black. So I'm basically going to do the canopy gunmetal grey, which I think will look quite good. The fuselage black, and then the rest of it, the colour I've chosen is pretty bright. It's going to be this sort of day glow pink cover. So this is a nice brand new roll of Aura cover. So that's going to be on top of the wings. I think I'm going to do the fins black as well, so it contrasts with the fuselage. And then underneath the wings, we're going to go for, so I can see it nice and easy, the checker. And then the fuselage, I mean, this isn't very exciting, but fuselage is just going to be in black covering. So that's something I want to get cracked on with now, is starting to cover this. I'm going to start with the wings, because I kind of want to get the wings covered before we attach the fuselage to the wings. So what I'll do is cover the wings in one piece and then cut away the areas where the fuselage is going to go, and also where the fins are going to go as well. I need to cut that away. But we've got all sorts of stuff to do. So obviously got to get the engine installed, get the fuel tank put in and plumbed in, servos installed, radio gear all connected up, that sort of stuff. And then we've got to get the elevons hinged and put in place, and then they're going to need connecting up to the servos, and so is the throttle. So all that coming up in this episode. So it's going to be a busy episode, could go on for quite a little while. I'm not going to film all the covering because that's not going to be much fun, but what I'm going to do now, as I've said, is get on with covering these wings. So I'm going to start, this is the top. I've just gone through and put a bit of filler, a bit of the Model Light filler I'm using. So there wasn't too many little dings in the wing, but I thought better fill those before we cover it. I'm going to start with the bottom, get that checker cover on, and then turn it over, get the pink put onto the top, and then that's going to lap round, so the pink overlaps the checker underneath. Because you've got to think about, you're going to get a bit of fuel and stuff like that, so we want that top coat to lap over the top of the underneath. So that's the first big job, to get that covered. I mean, it should be relatively easy to cover because it's just a plank of wood basically. So I'm going to try and get that done tonight, because I want to get both sides done. I don't want to just cover one side and then just leave it. A couple of other little bits. I've bought some of this stuff, which I saw. Again, Deluxe Materials. I like their stuff. So this is called Cover Grip, and this is kind of a glue that you paint on. I think it's PVA based, but it's heat activated. So areas where you might, you really want to get good adhesion from the film, you sort of paint a bit of this on. So what I've done is painted it around the cowl, because that's going to obviously be, the engine's going to be there, there's going to be oil flying about, so I thought I'd paint it on. The only thing is it's kind of not really working too well where this has got fuel proofer on it, so it's kind of looks like it's not going to dry properly there, but we'll leave that until tomorrow or whatever and see how it is. But I've sort of painted it on underneath, so that might not really work how I want it because of the fuel proofer, but thought I'd give it a go. Yeah, so I'm going to crack on with covering the wings. As I say, I'm not going to film all that covering, but I'll show you as I go through of the progress I'm making. Right, slight change of plan. I decided actually I will show you this first little bit of covering just in case anyone's interested. One thing I didn't factor in is that the roll, this is just slightly longer than the roll, which is annoying. Reason being, it's okay here in the middle, but as you get out towards the edge, because it's got this bit that kicks out at the end, it makes it slightly too big, which is kind of annoying because I wanted to do this in one sheet. But anyway, I'm going to have to do this in two halves. The top's going to be, well, I was going to do the top in one piece as well and then just cut the middle bit out where the fuselage goes, but I may as well just obviously do the top in two pieces now anyway. But anyway, I've got this cut out, rough shape. Key is you've got to have some nice new pretty sharp scissors, and then with your knife you want to put a brand new blade in. Although I say that, I haven't actually got a brand, this is pretty new. Only put this one in the other day, not done much with it, but actually for what I'm doing here I don't really need it super sharp because it's fairly basic, the shapes I'm cutting. But when you're doing intricate work you definitely need a brand new blade and a few blades. It's worth, for what they cost, it's worth just changing them as you go through. Otherwise what happens is you can snag the covering and you get like a little almost like a little tear, and it just looks messy basically. So we've got this half laid out, roughly cut to size. There's backing, so I've taken the backing off. Can be a bit tricky to get off, but this one's fairly easy. So that's the back of this film. Now this is actually Hobby King film that I've had for a long time, so hopefully it's still going to be okay. When I used it before, it was actually pretty good. So we'll see how we go. But there's loads of stuff out there online about certain films that people hate, and it's made a right mess of the plane. It's really hard to use. Aura cover, generally speaking, that is really nice film to use. You can tell the difference when you use that. Even the backing paper is nice. It's almost like a waxed paper as opposed to plastic. But this stuff wasn't too bad when I used it before, but it has been sat in the garage for a couple of years since I last used it. So another little tip, you can get stands and things like that for your iron, but I just put it on a cotton rag, or in this case it's an old cotton t-shirt. It's just really easy to put it down. I don't tend to use socks, they annoy me, but what I might do with this being such a big area is I'll just get a piece of like kitchen roll or workshop roll when I come to actually do the whole thing, and I'll just put that underneath just to make sure it doesn't scratch. Now it's not ideal on my bench because it's a bit of a mess at the moment, but it is what it is. So this iron, by the way, this is a Japanese covering iron. We bought this, me and my dad bought this when we bought our very first RC plane, which was a Precedent Flyboy, and that would have been back in 1990. So this is pretty old and it's still going strong. So I'm going to tack this front bit here. Like that. I'm going to pull it tight. Tack it here. Then we'll tack it over here. Seems to be going on pretty well. It has a certain smell which really brings back memories for me of when I was younger. It's a nice smell. It's not. It's kind of just like a hot sort of plastic smell, but it's quite distinctive, I would say. So with this, just tack it all along the edge. I mean, this is actually quite a nice shape to cover because it's not complex by any means. And because I want to overlap the top over the bottom of this, I don't need this to be, I can cut this really tight to the edge of the wing because I don't need this to lap over the top. It's going to be the other way around. So then what I'm going to do, that's fairly tight already, so all I need to do with that is going to be to run the iron over that with a piece of kitchen roll or something. Now we have got a bit of crease in there, which is annoying. There we go, it's gone away. Because of course the film does shrink, so as long as you haven't got a massive crease, the idea is that it will shrink and disappear. So I'm going to carry on going around the edge, get this all sealed at the edges, then we can trim it a bit. And then once I've trimmed it, then I can go over the whole thing and get it tight. But what I might do is I might leave going over the whole thing and tightening it up until I've got the top on as well, and then I can tighten everything up at the same time, so we reduce the amount of stress on one side of the wing. Alright, so that's gone on pretty nice actually, I've got to say, considering how cold it is and that I've not used this film for a while. So all we need to do now, you can see it's pretty well overlapped. Basically we just need to trim this down. I'm just going to use the scissors for this. And as I say, we can make this fairly tight because we're going to have the top going over the bottom. Always love it when the scissors do the glidey thing. And the other thing is as well, is where you've got a bit of a curve, that's going to be pretty tight around there. So all you need to do, this thing is really awkward because obviously just a big plank of wood, but we just need to cut probably a slot there and maybe another one here. Oops, caught the wood there. Another one there, so that will just, we're probably going to need another one there actually at that angle, like that, so we can just lap that round in a few bits. And of course we're going to need to cut it here at the front as well, because you've got two different surfaces effectively there. Okay, and then we can get this sealed down. It's actually probably slightly too long almost there, because it's Anyway, it's fine. The Aura cover will stick to this film okay. But obviously, the more wood you've got exposed, the easier it is to stick down. So we've just got this slightly tricky bit here where it curves, but this film is decent. It shrinks down well, sticks well. I don't know if Hobby King still sell it. I've not looked for a long time, but it was really cheap, and you got, I think, 10 meters on the roll, which was the kicker. Like when you sort of thought, oh, it's not far off the cost of most normal film, but then you realise that most normal film you buy is 2 meters, and this was 10 meters, so pretty good value. And it's pretty nice stuff. I've got my iron fairly hot as well. I tend to prefer it reasonably hot. It's very difficult to get this in the camera, by the way, so apologies if you can't see much, but hopefully you're getting the idea. I think one of the best coverers I have seen on YouTube is a guy called Andy Gideon. He's got a YouTube channel out in America somewhere, I'm not entirely sure where, but his skill at covering is incredible. I've never seen anything like it. Right, that's gone on really nice there at the back, because let me just show you this. I have to show you upside down, I think. But you can see there, I've not got much of the film overlapping because I want the pink top cover to come across and slightly under, so it's got all that wood to stick to, basically. Anyway, there we are. That's the first bit. That's looking pretty nice, to be honest. Trick, of course, now you know what's going to happen. I'll get the next piece cut and it's not going to line up, but I'll do my best to line it up to these squares. But it is the bottom, so it's not the end of the world. But yeah, as I say, I'll get this other side done. Same on the top, obviously some different covering, and then once both sides are covered completely, we'll get the iron. Let me kind of show you what I mean. In fact, I'll show you that. I'll come back to that when I'm ready to do it. All right, I'll crack on with this, and then you'll see it when we're ready to stretch the film. Right then, it is the following evening from when I was showing you this yesterday. So completed that side, got it lined up nicely, you can't even see there, so pretty pleased with that. And then on the other side, we've got the top coat. Now, you're probably looking at this and thinking that looks horrendous, but I haven't shrank it down yet. So what I'm going to do is I've dug out, I did say I don't really like socks, but I didn't even think I'd got one for the iron, but I have got one for the iron. So next job really, I'm just waiting for that to heat up. So I've just come in the workshop this evening. So run over this, I'll show you that, shrink it down. I have got a couple of danger areas here. So slightly worried about that there. You can see it's got a bit of a crease in it. And if I go over that with the iron, that's going to just end up with a nasty crease. But what I should be able to do is get my heat gun, which is almost as old as my iron. Probably bought that a year after buying the iron, but still going strong. So this doesn't get too hot. It's not like a paint stripping heat gun. Probably gets up to, it gets, yeah, up to about, I don't know, 180, 200 degrees. So it's not, well, it's made for covering. I bought that from a model shop, so it's made for this job. And that should hopefully stretch that crease out without it actually sticking together. And I'll need to do the same here as well. It's probably just my mistake really, not for not cutting enough slots in this where the angles change. Yeah, so got to do the same on both sides, but I was getting late last night and I didn't want to just tension one side and not do the other side, because then there's a risk of it warping, obviously. So I'm going to start by, we'll get the sock on. Should have put this sock on, shouldn't I, before I actually switch the iron on, but there we go. And then we can move on to getting the other bits covered, so I think I'm probably going to get the fuselage done then. Because the advantage of shrinking it with the iron is it will stick to the wood, as opposed to with the heat gun it will just stretch the film and not necessarily stick it down to the wood. Again, aura cover does tend to shrink really nicely. Oh, I might have to get the heat gun on that bit there as well. Yeah, I think I'm going to try the heat gun. Probably might not be able to show this on screen because it's going to be a bit awkward. We'll see. Okay, let's go over it again now with the iron and finally get some of these creases out completely. Okay, and there we are. That's that side. As you can see there, compare the difference. That's completely stretched now, looking nice. Couple of tiny little bits that just need stretching and then they disappear. So there we are. I'm going to get on and I think I'm going to do the other side first because this is starting to warp already. So want to make sure we've got this underside done nice and flat. So I'm going to get all that done and then I'll show you the finished article. Then we can move on to getting the fuselage done. All right. Well, hard to get it in all in the camera, but that is done. All nicely shrunk down. Not a wrinkle in sight. Obviously got this split down the middle, but don't worry about that because the fuselage, I've got to cut all this away anyway. So the fuselage is going to run down there. And then I have to say, I continue to be impressed with this Hobby King film. It shrinks really nicely. It does seem pretty good. So yeah, there we are. And you can see I've, like on there for example, the top comes over the bottom, like I said. So that's good for the fuel. The only slight little mistake I've made is I cut it a bit too long here, so it's not quite symmetrical with the other side, but it's the underside anyway, so we're not too worried about that. But my OCD is not very happy about that. But there we go, pretty pleased with that. Now on the subject of trimming, I did dig out, I bought this ages ago. It's a little trimming tool made by Sleck. I've never actually used it. It's actually got you can see it's got a blade in it there. I think all you do is you get your, so like say if you were doing this, you would you'd overlap, you'd cover this, you'd overlap your film, and then I think you literally just get this and run it down like that, or you probably have to do it at an angle like that, I guess. And it's supposed to, because of the size of it, it will give you around about a 1.5mm piece of trim to overlap. So I'm going to give that a go because trimming is probably the hardest bit to get right, I would say. I also asked a guy on YouTube, Andy, that I was talking about yesterday, that's just so good at covering. Sent him a message and he replied back and said he basically just uses about 10 or 20 scalpel blades and just keeps on changing them. That's all he uses. So I've dug a few more out, but I've ordered a load off Amazon, some Swan Morton number 11s. So I've ordered 100 of them in a box. So loads of those. Obviously that's not just for this project, but I've got some more coming up that are going to need covering. So it's something I'm going to be doing quite a lot. So I'm going to crack on now and get everything covered. Pretty much all of it can be covered before I move on to the next phase of assembly. So that's what I'm going to get done. Like even the elevons, I can get those covered, and then once they're covered, I can then need to put the hinges in those. But I'll show you all that further down this video. This piece, for example, there's a couple of bits that are going to be, you're going to have to think about it a little bit, a bit like the wing, I suppose. This is going to be covered in black, but then once I've covered it, I've got to trim it back again because we've got to glue on this triangle. So obviously I've got to cut this down to size, but it's going to start about there and it's going to end about there. But that's got to be glued on. But I'm thinking to cover it first, trim the film away, then glue this on. I think that's going to be a lot less, well, a lot easier than trying to cover it with this glued on. Yeah, so I've got some bits like that to sort out, and then obviously I can put some more covering on top of this. I don't know though, you know, maybe I will just cover the whole thing. I'll glue that on first and then cover it, I think, actually. Probably will make life a lot easier. Anyway, we've got some bits like that to sort out. So it's going to take me a little while. Probably knowing me, it's going to take me a few days, but I'll pause the video here, and then the next clip you'll see will be all done. So all the covering will be done, so we're ready to restart the assembly and getting all the components fitted together. Right, so I thought I would give you a little update. I've had a bit of a disaster, so to speak. So built the two tail pieces, which went together really well. I was really pleased with these, as you know. Decided to, rather than cover them first, to glue on the triangle first, because I thought it would be easier than trying to cut away the covering. But basically that was a massive mistake. Shouldn't have done it, because I've tried to cover one of them and it's just an absolute nightmare. Because now the other thing I've found is that the triangle that they've supplied in the kit is too big. So this is 3/4 inch triangle, and that's all that is that came with it. This should actually be 1/2 inch. So the top of the triangle is going above the bottom piece of wood. But on the plan, I've just double checked it, and it's 1/4 inch, and it still leaves about 1/8 of an inch of the bottom of this. So if that was the case, you could have done it then, because you could have sealed the film to that bottom piece of, that bottom beam, even if you'd got the triangle on. But because I've glued the triangle on first, and it's the wrong size triangle, it's too big, I can't fasten the film onto anything, so I've got to try and lap the film down, and when you shrink it over these gaps, it just sort of balloons. It just doesn't work. So it's really annoying, but I've basically got to build all these over again, and they're perfect. They're really nicely put together. When sod law is, I'm probably not going to be able to get them as nice as I did these ones. I mean, perfectly flat. But anyway, I'm going to do my best. I've stripped some more wood down, 1/2 inch, so same size as those bits, and then I've just got a strip piece down for the bottom that's underneath here, which is 3/4 of an inch, and then I'm going to cover them before I stick the triangle on. But even saying that, I've ordered some. I've run out of triangle out now anyway, because I've only got some small pieces left, and it's not enough. So I've ordered some more, and I've ordered a whole range, because triangle is something that I haven't got. I've got loads of boltzwood sheet, but don't have any triangle. So I've ordered a 3/4 inch like this. I've ordered 1/2 inch, which is what I'm going to use, and then I've also ordered some 1/4 inch as well, just to have it in stock. But even saying that, I'm going to get it covered first before I stick the triangle on. But yeah, really annoying. So basically got to throw this away, and the other one. In fact, the other one, I tried to cut the triangle off with my bandsaw, but it's just made a bit of a mess of it, and I can only get the bandsaw up to sort of here, so annoying. But yeah, it's gonna have to throw these away and start again. But these things happen. It's part of the fun of modelling, I guess. So there we are. I'm going to crack on with that, and as I said before, I'll show you when everything's covered and we're ready to move on to installing the radio gear or whatever it is next. Right then, it's been about a week since the last clip, and I did say it was going to take me, a few days to get the covering done, but it's pretty much done. Can't remember what I showed you in the last clip, so I think I did show you the wings, but here they are anyway. So that's all nice and stretched out, and that's the underneath. Should be nice and visible. Then we've got the fuselage. Not done the canopy yet, so I've got to spray that silver or gunmetal grey. Obviously that's going to sit over this top hatch, so you're not going to see. Obviously I've not covered the headrest there, or the front of it, but you're not going to see that once the canopy is gunmetal grey and screwed into position. So we'll move that out of the way, but everything's looking, I'm quite pleased with the covering. There's a few little tricky angles and things, like the headrest there. It's not easy to cover, and I think the bit that I like the most, apart from the wings are really nice, but the wings I've got aura cover is the pink, which is really nice to use, and I think I mentioned the checker is from Hobby King, which you can't get it anymore, but that's nice film as well, it really is. This black is McGregor covering, which I bought a while ago, and it's okay, but it's definitely not as nice as the aura cover, all that Hobby King stuff, so it can be a bit of a pain. And if you haven't done any covering, it's one of those things that it's quite rewarding, but also very annoying at the same time, and time consuming. It does take a long time to cover, but I'm quite pleased with the way the fuselage has come out, particularly around here, because managed to get it wrapped around these rounded bits. Yeah, and it's gone quite nice really, and same on the back. So covered the sides first and then did the top. But that's all looking nice. Still looks like a narrow boat, which is a type of boat here in the UK, but I'm sure once I've got it glued to the wings, it will look like a plane. And then these are the fins, and I think these are probably going to annoy me, because I reckon when it gets hot, if it's sunny, they're going to all crinkle up, but it is what it is. I've got those covered, and if you remember, got these ones remade, and now I've covered these. So I covered the whole thing, and then I've just cut away where the triangle is going to go. I've got the triangle pieces here, and this time using the recommended 1/2 inch triangle rather than 3/4 inch, I think it is. So that's going to go, they're going to be epoxied on there, I think, like that. Obviously I've got to cover these as well, so I'm going to cover these first, so cover this top surface and the ends, and then we'll glue those on, and then they'll be ready to glue onto the wing. But yeah, the wings are all, fins are all done. So what I'm doing next is I'm just putting the servos in. So I've just had to mess around making the servo tray slightly bigger for the servos to actually slot in, but got that sorted now. And these are some old servos I got out my spare servo box, and they actually came out of a helicopter I bought off eBay, but they are Metal Gear digital servos, so I think they're going to be okay. They're made by Hyperion. Not come across those before, I don't think, but they should be fine for this. I've tested them all, run them through my servo tester, ran them through a few times on the auto modes, make sure they're all okay. Yeah, and they seem to be working, so they've gone in there quite nicely. So all I am going to do now is we've got to drill some holes, so get these in position.
Actually, that's going to have to come over. I'll move it over to that side. No, this side will be better.
And then in here, I have got some really nice servo screws from RC World. I've got loads of the same ones, so I just need to find a packet that's open. They're probably a bit too long, but we'll go for these. And the reason I like these is because they've got a hex head. Because you tend to find with servo screws that they all end up rounding out. I don't know why, but they just don't seem to be very good. Now, I don't have any top hats for these servos, but I have got the rubber grommets, but it does mean that the grommets have sort of squidged around a bit, but it should be okay. Okay, that's got those all done, so we can put these away now. That adds a bit of weight to this now as well, so now I am ready to show you that in there. Looks okay. I'm ready now to glue the fuselage to the wing. I wanted to put these in before I in fact, you know what, I think I might get the engine and throttle set up before I glue it to the wing, because once it's on the wing it becomes then a great big plank of wood that I've got to try and work around. So I think it will be easier to get the engine just temporarily mounted and just mess around with the throttle, because I suspect that's going to be a little bit awkward. So let me get set up for that, and then I can show you what we need to do. Okay, so for the throttle I've bought this, which is Dubro micro pushrod system, and I've drilled a hole already. I've actually had to drill a hole, I don't know if you can see it there, yes, just there. I've drilled a hole through the engine mount for the throttle, so that will be where this tubing's going to go through. So let's just get one out. So that's going to go something like this, and then we can epoxy that probably to the side of the fuselage, and then if we put the inner in, just see how that runs. Because it is a bit tight as it goes through the firewall, but there's not a lot I can do about it. So we'll have to just see. But for now, let me pull that out like that, and then if we get the engine, see how much of this we need. So the engine's going to go about there. So yeah, I think probably about there. We probably want about that much sticking out there. Now then, is that going to bind on that piece of wood there? It might do. But I think if I put a Z bend in the end of this, it will be okay. So I think we can get that glued in there. I think that's going to be okay. What I might do is I could put a little bit more on it. Yes, that's just going to be alright. I think if I put a Z bend through this, it's just going to do it. I hate doing throttle linkages. They're always a pain, basically. Let's just trim this down. Let's get that outer glued in place now. So that's okay there.
We can probably just use a bit of thick CA to glue that in place.
Right, so that's actually worked pretty well. So I've got a little Z-bend in there, which you can't quite see, but there is a Z-bend, trust me. And then I've just taped it in position for now, just to hold it, but what I'm going to do is put some, I'm going to epoxy it about here. So that's going to be epoxied to the side of the fuselage, stop that from going anywhere. And then here, up at the servo end, it's obviously going to come out here, but I just need to cut this back a bit, probably about there. But I've temporarily put the engine in place, and well, the engine's not really that well fastened down. As you can see, I've only just put 2 screw bolts in, but I've not tightened them. But it's relatively easy to move, and it's not binding on anything either, which is nice. It's not like super smooth. There's a bit of friction there, but it's nothing that the servo won't be able to cope with. So actually, that's gone in quite nicely, better than I thought it was going to be. I expected it to be really hard to move, and then I don't know, I was going to have to mess around with something. But pretty happy with that. So what I'm going to do now, because I'm just thinking, like I said before, once I've glued this to the fuselage, it's a bit of a one-way street. It's then going to become very awkward to work on, just because of the size of the thing and not being able to get underneath. So I think what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to mount the engine on. And if you remember, I think I showed previously, well, you can't see them now because I've covered over them, but there are 4 holes here which I'm going to use to get the bolts up, and then the nuts are going to be on the top here. I just could do with finding some little washers, I think, just to go on there, because it's going to be virtually impossible, I think, to try and tighten the bolts up underneath. I don't know, maybe I'll be able to do it. I suppose if I do the back ones first, I might be able to do it. I'll have a go first and see, but if I have a problem, I have drilled those holes ready underneath. But yeah, I think there's no reason why I can't get the engine mounted, and again, it's going to be a lot easier to mount it before I glue the fuselage on. Okay, so I think that's going to be my next job, really. So I'll come back to you when I've fiddled around with those bolts and got that mounted. Right, so we're actually getting on pretty well. So got the engine mounted. Now that was a bit of a fiddle, as I suspected. I did try and put the bolts in that way and see if I could get something in, like some long nose pliers in the front there, to try and grab hold of the bolts, the nut, and tighten it up, but it was pretty much impossible. So I just couldn't do it. So as suspected, I needed to use the holes that are drilled in the bottom, so it's just as well I did that. And I've put the bolts up this way, and then the lock nuts are on the top here. But it was a bit of fiddle, but got there in the end, and that's all nice and solid there, mounted. I'm going to leave that there now. And as you can see, I've got the throttle cable glued. The outer's I've just literally epoxied it to the side of the fuselage like that. And that has actually gone in quite nice. And if you look at the front, we've got full movement of the throttle. So fully open, fully closed, nothing's binding. And it's a relatively smooth movement as well. I tested it before I put all the servo together, and it is quite. There's a bit of resistance there, but it's quite smooth. So it should be easy really for this servo. It's metal geared servo. So yeah, that's working nice. So I'm really pleased with that, because often its throttle is you think throttle's going to be easy, but it can sometimes be a pain to get them set up and make sure that you've got full movement and all that stuff, and you're not sort of stressing the servo out too much. But that's all sorted. So next big job is to get this fuselage mounted to the wings. So I'm going to go for it now. I don't think I can put it off any longer, and I don't think I need to really, because really my next job once I've got this mounted, is to get these Elevon servos connected up, and I need the wings to be on, because I've also got to cover the ailerons, hinge the Elevons, and get those hinged. Obviously cut the slots into the wing as well for those, and get those mounted, and then we can see where and how we're going to run these push rods. So I can't really do that without having this mounted to the wing. So we're going to go for it. So what I'm going to do is, because this line of covering here doesn't actually run down the middle, so I need to measure halfway between these 2 points, put a mark there, and then do the same. I can't get this in the shot, it's so wide, but basically measure halfway point at the bottom of the wing. So we've got 2 halfway points there, so we know exactly where the middle is on the wing. And then I need to put the fuselage on, draw around it, so we've got a line for where the covering goes, and then I just literally cut the covering away where the fuselage is going to sit. And then I'm going to use some 30-minute epoxy to glue the fuselage down, and I'm going to put this on a flat surface. What I'm actually thinking of doing is laying the plans down on my garage floor, because it is nice and flat, my floor, and it's quite smooth as well. So I'm going to lay the plans down so this doesn't get scratched, put this on top of the plans, put the fuselage on top with the epoxy on, and then just weigh it down with some metal blocks and some big 6S LiPo batteries, which are pretty heavy. So yeah, I'm going to get that done. So I'll show you once I've got this measured out and cut out, ready to... Right, so starting to look a little bit more like a plane now. I've not got it glued on yet, just got this put into position, but I've got it all measured out, and I've cut the film away, so I'll show you that in a second. But yeah, that's how that's going to go basically. So if I just move that, you can see there where I've cut the film away to expose the bolts are underneath. So we're going to mix up a bucket load of 30-minute epoxy now, and then I'm going to basically spread that across the bottom of the fuselage. I think will be the easiest way to do it, and then yeah, get that pushed down on there. And I'm going to basically, as I said, I've just got the plans laid out on the floor like that, so I'm just going to put the wing down on there. That's nice and flat, and obviously the plan's going to protect the bottom of the wing. I think that's the best way to do it, really. I could do it like I've got it on the bench now, but I just want to make sure the bottom of the wing is completely flat, because obviously I don't want to really get, well, obviously I don't want to get a warp in the wing or anything like that. So I think that's going to be the best way to do it. And then what I've got to do is I've got to cover and hinge the 2 ailerons. So I've just checked these as well. So they're going to go like that and like that. So it's all lining up nicely. So the centre, you know, the gap, the centre of the ailerons is pretty much in the centre of the fuselage. So that's going to look good. So got to get those hinged and covered. So I'll get all that done. And essentially what I'll do is I'll come back to you when I'm ready to put the push rods in, and looking at the way these ailerons go on, I keep calling them ailerons, elevons, you know what I mean. So if I put that one on, for example, it's basically going to be pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to run a push rod straight through here, a hole in here, and then the control horn will kind of be on the end there like that. So that should be absolutely fine, and that'll give us loads of movement as well. And I'm just going to use a push rod, like a thick push rod, so I'm not going to use any outer tubing or anything like that, so it'll just be a nice thick piece of push rod, so there won't be any play in that. So yeah, going to get all those little bits done, but I'll come back to you when I'm going to install the push rod, so you can see what I'm doing around that. So I have the ailerons all hinged and attached and covered, obviously. Yeah, we'll be ready to set them up. All right, well, it's going to take me a little while to get all that done, but a few seconds for you. Well, as you can see, this thing is really starting to take shape now. It's actually looking way better than I thought it was going to be. I kind of just, I had this for ages. It was pretty cheap to buy from Sarek Hobbies because it's just a wood pack. I sort of just bought it on a whim because I can't remember how much it cost because it was a couple of years ago, but it really wasn't much. And I thought, you know, I quite like these sort of shaped aircraft. I quite a fan of sort of delta wings. And I'd already bought another one from Sarek, which I've still got that to build. And it's much more, I forget what it's called, but it's like a built-up wing, and it's kind of like a more advanced version of this, I suppose I could describe it as. But I bought this and I thought, oh, that looks a bit of fun. It's so simple. And I didn't think it would look this nice. I am really pleased with it. And it looks fast. And we've not even got, I think I've just ordered a new spinner for it because I put I'd got a white spinner spare. And when I was messing around with it yesterday, I put that on the front to see what it would look like, and it's perfect size, but it just ruined the look of it being white. So I've ordered a black one, a nice one with a metal back plate. So once I've got all that, this thing is going to look mean, and it does look fast, considering the fuselage is just a box. You can see I've got the canopy sprayed up. Really pleased with how that's come out. Gunmetal grey, obviously sprayed the inside of it. Looks the business. It really does look good. Of course, the aura cover pink has gone on really well. The only bit that I'm not too pleased about is like the covering on these fins is not the best. That black covering I've got is not the best stuff. I think it's the J Perkins stuff, and it's all right, but it's not as nice as the aura cover, of course, and actually not as nice as the Hobby King covering, which I've got underneath, but it's still fine. And the only thing I'm concerned about is I think, you know, the sun is going to wrinkle these fins up quite a lot. It's hard to really stretch that out. But anyway, I am really pleased with it. And when we've got that tune pipe on, you know, going down the side of it, this thing's going to look like a missile. And given that it is pretty much a flat wing, I think it's going to go like one as well. There's going to be very, well, apart from the fuselage, there's not much drag on it. So yeah, really pleased. So the last job I just did before I've switched the camera back on is I've just got the elevons put on. So these are all hinged up. I've used 3 hinges, Dubro pin hinges, so good quality hinges, and I've epoxied these in place. Before I put the epoxy in, I brushed some. Actually, used some WD-40 this time. I brushed it onto the hinge to stop the epoxy, and they're yeah, I think they're pretty loose actually. I think the resistance is actually just where it hits the chamfer on the elevon, but as you can see, it drops down under its own weight. So I don't think the servo is going to have a problem moving that at all. I haven't glued these fins on, so I'm going to save these right until the end because I'm just going to catch these as I'm working on it, but I just wanted to put those on to show you how it's coming along. So next job now is I want to get the push rod set up. So I need to put 2 control horns here and here, and then we've got to drill 2 holes in there and get it all hooked up to the servo. So I'm going to get all the components out and I'll show you what I'm thinking that I need to do to get this sorted. Okay, so this is the setup I'm going to go for. So I've just dug these out of my parts box. So we've got some medium clevises, the ones that screw through to the other side. So we've got the screws as well that have come with these, although I've only got 3 out, so I'm going to have to go and dig a 4th one out. Now, I can't put these right on the trailing edge because it's going to hit the back of the fuselage, so they're probably going to go something like this. So probably about there, like that, and then that gives me loads of movement about there. Yeah, so something about like that, I would say. So that's plenty of movement there. And then for the push rods, I'm just going to keep it simple. So I've got some fairly thick push rods, so they're not going to bend, and obviously they're not very long. They're only going from here to here. So I've got metal clevis on the end, and I'll put some silicone tubing on that as well, just to lock that in place. And then this end's just a normal end. This one's actually slightly bent, but I've got to cut a fair bit off it anyway. But essentially that's going to go there, and then I'll use my Z-bend pliers, Z-bend in there, get that all marked up, make sure that I've got plenty of leeway on the thread so I can move it in and out. So if the Z-bend's not quite in the right place, I can adjust it using the clevis. Yeah, and that's it really. So obviously got to drill 2 holes in there, get these clevises on. First job is to get the clevises on so we can figure out exactly how long we need the push rods. Then I need to drill the holes, feed them through, connect them to the clevis, and then we can mark them up with a Sharpie where they come over the servo arm, and then we can get the Z-bend pliers out and get them bent. So should be relatively straightforward, and I'll try and show you what I'm doing as I go along. Right, that was actually quite fiddly, mainly because I had a problem with the clevises, and for some reason they wouldn't clip in, you know, where the pin goes through the hole on the other side. And I thought it was because maybe it was too tight at angle or something like that, but it turns out these clevises are, I don't know whether it's because they're perhaps a bit old, because I got another one out of the packet and it was exactly the same before I'd even put it on the model. So they must be under a bit of load, and then when you unclip them, the pin just bends to one side and then you can't reclip them. But anyway, managed to get it done in the end. You can see got the Z bends through here, and I used, this is a little trick that I always do, I did learn this off someone, I can't remember who, but when you cut the end of your push rod, if you keep a piece like that, put it in your drill and then drill through the servo arm, you get a really exact fit for the push rod to go through. Particularly useful if you are using Z bends like I do, because then you know you've got a really solid fit. But yeah, that's working. So got the servos there, she's on the servo tester at the moment. And then if we just zoom out a bit, I can only show you the 2 different directions, but we've got plenty of movement there. As you can see, I expect this is going to be very sensitive because the ailerons, you know, are right across the wings. So I think that's going to be more than enough movement. So yeah, that's all done. The only thing I think I would have done slightly different is I might have been tempted to move the horns actually a bit further towards the end, because the horns are actually going back inside the fuselage. Sorry, not the horns. Yeah, so the move the horns to the end, but the clevises are actually going inside the fuselage. But I mean, it's fine. They're not binding. They were binding, but I've just drilled the hole out a bit more, and they're okay. But if the horns were slightly further out towards the trailing edge of the elevons, then you'd have a bit more, less of the clevis going inside. But I don't think it's an issue. But of course, it goes against what you know, like putting horns on the horn. The horn should always go as close to the leading edge as they can. And I've checked on the build photos, and he's got them pretty close. He's actually got them closer than I have. But anyway, it's absolutely fine. That's just one thing to bear in mind. But yeah, so elevons all done. So now we're really getting close to getting this finished. Literally just got to put the fuel tank in. Got to mount my receiver. I might do a little board for the receiver. Probably one thing I ought to do is start checking the CG as well, so we can figure out where the battery's going to go. But yeah, got to get the receiver mounted, battery put in, a switch put in, which should be pretty simple. Again, I may well put the switch, I might actually put the switch here, you can't quite see, but there on the end of this plate potentially. So I might just drill a slot in that, put the switch there. But yeah, we're almost there. So last few little bits. So what shall I do next? I think next I will put the switch in, and maybe just get my receiver mounted. I think the receiver, I might put a plate across here and just mount it to that, or I could just stick it to the bottom. I might just do that actually, it'd be a lot easier and a lot more secure just to stick it to the bottom there, and then we can have a play around with where we're going to put the battery. So yeah, next job, let me get the switch sorted. Okay, so what I've decided is I'm going to finish this episode here because it's been a long time getting to this stage, and I think I said at the start of this one that I might try and build the whole thing during this episode, but I just think it's going to take too long. So going to bring it to a close here, and in the next episode we will get it finished. So we've got to finish putting the radio gear in, we've got to get the exhaust mounted, put the switch in, put the fuel tank in, all those well, we've got to mount the fins as well, so we've got to glue those on and cut those out. So all those last little bits we need to finish it. So if you've enjoyed this and you're enjoying following along, then I'd love to have you on board as a subscriber. It's the best way you can help me out because it doesn't cost you anything. So just hit the subscribe button and join the channel. That would be fantastic. Give me a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it as well, that helps me. And if you've got any comments, stick them in the comments box, and I'll always make sure that I get back to you. Thanks for everyone that has supported me so far, and I will see you soon for the next one.